If you've seen my earlier videos, you've seen my M1 Carbine stock in this configuration. It has a polymer stock made by Choate, Choate, Coate, however you pronounce it. Don't send me emails over it. But it's worked very well. But I get a lot of flack from folks out in the internet land for ruining a great military carbine. And let me just tell you right up front, I didn't ruin any great military carbine. This was a gun that was built by Springfield Armory, all from mil-spec parts. After the Korean War, it never saw service with the U.S. Army, and the original wood stock was completely trashed. So I never felt really bad about doing this. But these guns have gotten a lot more valuable, and I thought it deserved to go back to its military configuration, so that's what I did. Now I'll just run you through the process here. You can get brand new, unfinished M1 carbine stocks from a number of suppliers. Fulton Armory is probably the best one in my book. And you can get them for anywhere from $150 to $200. You can also get used stocks like this from places like Fulton Armory for about 50 bucks, but they're going to require some work. Now, this one I happen to get from a friend of mine for a great price of nothing. But even so, it's got some issues, and I decided it was going to have to be refinished. Well, this stock is really not in too bad shape, but it's got some issues, and I'm going to try to address that. So, first thing I did was pulled off the butt plate, which this is just a pretty cheap piece of stamped steel. And now I'm going to strip the stock down, because one of the things see, as the handguard had been attached to the stock for God knows how long with plastic shipping tape. And that tape has left some really bad residue on there. And the finish is not in bad shape, but it's not in great shape, and there's some dents on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to strip the finish off, sand it down, try to steam out a few of the dents, stain it, and then put it back together. So we're just going to get going with a Coda stripper, and we'll get everything coated up and get her stripped, and then we'll move on to the next step. Well, we've got the stock and the handguard scraped down, and this finish was pretty tough, I've got to say. Most of it I had to go over 3 or 4 times and use a razor blade as a scraper. That's how tough it was. Now it's time to start sanding it, because this is, been a previously completely finished gun. I'm not going to have to start with 60 grit paper or anything like that. I'm going to be starting with 220 grit sandpaper, which is fairly light stuff, and I'm just going to go over the whole gun. I'm going to work my way up through 320, 400, and 600, and then I'll be done, and then we'll start evaluating whether or not we can pop some of these dents. Well, I've sanded the stock down with 320 grit sandpaper, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to take some of these dings out of it by steaming them, and I'm going to use a flat iron and a wet cloth. And this will work as long as the wood fibers aren't cut. So if it's a gouge, nothing's going to work. But if it's just a dent, I should be able to inject steam in there, and that'll swell those fibers back into place. So let's give it a try. So I've got a flat iron heating up. I think we'll be good to go. I'm going to soak a cloth just with some water. And we've got a dent right here, that line right there, and I'm going to try to take that out. So we'll see. We'll see if this works or not. I'll lay that over it. Let's see how we're doing. Okay. You really can't tell by looking at it, but the dent is pretty much steamed out. But because it's dirty, I've still got that line there. So, and I also steamed out these dents right here. So I'm going to go on and try to pop as many of these as I can. Well, I had this sanded smooth as an old bone, and then I whiskered it. And when you whisker a stock, what you do is you wet it down with water and then hold it over a heat source. I use the burner of a stove. I hold it about 3 inches above that. And what that does, and I'm going to get all Sherlock Holmes on you here, this magnifying glass, and hope you can see it. What that does is all the little cut ends of the wood grain pop up. So you can see all those little whiskers on there, and that makes the stock feel very rough again. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to sand it down again, and that's called whiskering the stock. And I'm just going to use a very fine sandpaper. I'm going to use 600 grit, and I'm just going to lightly sand that back down to a real smooth consistency and take all of those whiskers off. So when I'm done with that, we'll be ready to stain it. If you don't do that, I mean, you're going to sand it and everything's going to feel nice and smooth to you. And if you don't whisker it, you might put the stain on, and when the stain dries, it'll feel rough again to you. You'll feel just a little bit of roughness when you run your finger over it. And you might blame that on the stain or on the finish, but really what it is it's those little grain ends that were cut just kind of curling up a little bit. So you want to make sure you get those out. I'm going to stain the stock with just minwax wood stain. This is a dark walnut color, and I'm just going to brush it on and let it sit for a while. I'm going to let that sit on the stock for the next 10 minutes. And whatever has not absorbed into the grain by then, I'm just going to wipe off. Now I'm finishing the stock. Yesterday I put the first coat of finish on, and I use minwax tongue oil finish. Now what I'm going to do is I'll put on one coat every day for 3 days, and then it'll be ready to use. And after that I'll put another coat on each week for 4 weeks, and then that'll be it. 7 coats is what I generally do. So before I put on the next coat, I'm going to take this ball of tow, and tow is just unspun rough flax fibers. You can buy them in a lot of muzzleloading supply places. I use it for shotgun wadding for muzzleloaders and my fowlers, and for cleaning muzzleloaders. But it's a good rough fiber, but it's not rough enough to scratch the stock. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rub down the entire stock with this and get any high spots off of that finish before I put on the next coat. The stock's had a good rub down now. This is the hand guard, and I'm going to start applying the next coat of finish. I'm just going to show you how I do it, and it's easier on this small hand guard. I do it by hand. I'm just going to dip my finger in it, and I'm going to get that oil on there. Not much, just a drop, and this is going to be enough to do this entire hand guard and then some. So once I've got it on, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to rub it with my palm. And when you do that, you'll feel the oil getting hot, and that's what you want, and that helps to drive it into the pores. Just going to rub it until I feel it getting nice and hot, and then I know I'm good. Now, I put a lot more on for the first coat than I do for these subsequent coats. Just a drop and stretch it as far as you can. The first coat you put on fairly thick because the wood's going to absorb more. And the same deal with the main stock itself. Just a touch. I get that on. I'm going to spread that as far as I can. So here's the final result. The M1 Carbine is back in uniform, and I'm pretty pleased with it. In the next video, we'll take it out. We'll just do a little shooting with it.